parties in the DRC for the fantastic campaigns they carried. I mean, I was following very closely, and it was wonderful what they did. They really prepared the public to go and vote. And I think people were mobilized to vote, notwithstanding the difficulties in the DRC, the banning of the Electoral Commission offices and the loss of election equipment. There was a very committed concern by the DRC people to go to the vote. I think it would be terrible if the National Independent Electoral Commission and the president let the people down at the last hour by not recognizing and respecting the people's choice in this election, notwithstanding the difficulties that are there.
All right, Professor. Jean Mobatsenga, now the message by the electoral agency was clear, that they are not ready to actually release the results, and obviously this actually brought the fear of tension rising. But the opposition, in a way or the other, reads malice in this particular move, showing the possibility of vote manipulation, rather. Now, this delay, yes, it is caused by logistical problems posed by DRC's size, but in no bad faith, the question of credibility of the will of the people must come up. As a researcher with Amnesty International, do you think that the will of the people will be upheld in this particular election?
Well, it's difficult to say whether it will or not. And as Amnesty International, we focus mostly on the human rights situation. We don't focus more on democracy and elections as such. I'm just coming back from Kinshasa. I was there on the 30th when the elections took place, and I could see in the faces of the women and men who went to the polling station a huge hope and a huge engagement, commitment for change. As Professor just mentioned, the difficulties were there. The rain, the technical difficulties, the way the elections were organized, but still people went to the polls, and they wanted to use their right to vote as a means to get change. Actually, in a region like Beni in eastern DRC, where there is an Ebola outbreak and where elections were cancelled, even there, people still organized themselves and had a mock election. Thousands of people turned and were able to cast their symbolic vote. So this tells how big the hope is in the country, but also how dangerous it is to try to manipulate the results, because I'm not sure whether people will accept it this time. And they've been waiting for these elections for over 2 years. So now they feel like the time for change has come, and they have said what they wanted to say. So their expectations is that the Electoral Commission and the government uphold the people's will.
All right, Jean. Professor Peter Nyang-Nyong'o, let's take a look at the capacity of the Democratic Republic of Congo, especially among the Great Lakes region, in terms of what potential it has as a country. We well know that it is a regional powerhouse only in terms of peace and tranquility. But do you think, even as we take a look at that, do you think that African leaders have actually done their part in ensuring that the peaceful transition of power is actually input, as well as human rights violations are not in check, not just in the DRC, but other countries as well?
I think what we need to do is say, what is it that we must do now to guarantee peace, security, and democracy in the Democratic Republic of the Congo? And it's quite clear that without peace and security in the DRC, there will be no democratic governance. So the regional powers must understand and realize that so many years of political instability in the DRC, so many years of corruption in the DRC has retarded development of the DRC such that infrastructural development has been very slow. And this is one of the problems that the Electoral Commission faced in the DRC. How do you reach from one point to the other? Now, the irony is that the DRC is the richest country in Africa. It is the second largest nation in Africa, only second to Algeria. It is the 11th largest nation in the world. It has some of the world's richest raw minerals, like diamonds, cobalt, copper, nickel, you name it. They are in the DRC. So this is a country, if it is stable, well-governed, with security and peace, can catapult into the first world very quickly. Why do I say so? Because during these years of instability, a lot of Congolese people went abroad and got very good education. I will tell you that if you meet some of the people who are in these political parties, they are very highly educated. There are very many professionals in many fields. If only there was peace and security in the DRC, they would return home and do wonders. The DRC have 5 million people as refugees around the DRC because it shares borders with so many countries. Internally, there are at least 1.5 million people who have been displaced. Peace and security will give these people the opportunity to develop their nation. I would urge the AU, I would urge the East African Commission, I would urge the Francophonie, all of us to join hands and ensure that this 2019, so many years after independence in the DRC, we must make sure that peace, security, and democratic governance comes back to the DRC.
Well, Anyang Nyong'o, before we actually release you, we had the United Nations Security Council meeting on Friday to discuss how to react to the state of affairs in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they were unable to reach an agreement. And if we bear in mind the developments that have also happened in the neighboring Gabon, should the AU actually take a hint from the United States, who have actually made a move to deploy soldiers in Gabon to take care of their own nationals who are working in these foreign lands? Should the AU actually take a move and try and prevent the worst from happening?
The AU has a much more potent weapon to use rather than soldiers protecting their citizens in the DRC. The AU has the legitimacy of representing the whole of Africa, and the AU Peace and Security Committee. The AU should make sure that they reach Joseph Kabila in Kinshasa, sit down with Joseph Kabila and say to Joseph Kabila, point blank, that according to the provisional results that we have, and the Catholic bishops were right. The provisional results are there, showing quite clearly that the opposition have won this election. The opposition have said very clearly that they are willing to join hands with Kabila in a government of national reconstruction to reconstruct the DRC, a kind of broad national democratic front. The EU should pick up this opportunity and not to think just there are people in the DRC like the US has done, but think of reestablishing peace, security, and national reconstruction in the DRC. And therefore, Kabila must be reached very quickly. I would urge the presidents around both the SADC and the East African community to have a joint mission of heads of state to go and see Kabila before DRC plunges into a crisis just because of Kabila's selfishness or trying to impose Shadari, his presidential candidate, on the people of the DRC.
All right, Jean Mobat Senga, speaking in terms of human rights, we saw the government actually shut down internet access in that particular area in a bid to actually lay down claims of suggestions of who actually won in this particular presidential election. Is this move ill-informed, considering the freedom of expression vis-a-vis the stability of this particular country?
Yeah, so the internet shutdown, first of all, a quick clarification, it's all over the country. It's not only in some parts of the country. And in addition to the internet shutdown, there is also a messaging shutdown, and some media outlets have been closed including RFI, which is the most important francophone media in DRC. It's a French-based media, and journalists have been harassed and intimidated. One of them, at least, have been asked to leave the country because the government didn't find, didn't like what she was doing as a journalist. But for us, it was unfair. That decision was unfair. So it's part of a strategy by the DRC government to control the opinion and to silence the people. And it's not the first time, unfortunately. Over the last 3 years, this is the 7th time there is an internet shutdown in the country. And as the professor was saying, it's the region, the SADC, the ICJLR, the African Union should take more responsibility to address the situation in a firm way. So far, they've been involved in elections observation, but they've been quiet on the human rights violations, including the internet shutdown, apart from some tweets from AU officers, but that's not enough. They should go straight, see the president, see the other influential members of his government and say, no, there is a red line that can't be crossed, especially in this particular time. The internet shutdown is not only a problem for civil and political rights. It's also in this world of ours, it has also been become a very critical tool for business, especially for small business, for young people in the DRC who use it to earn a living. So shutting down the internet for now 10 days, and we are still counting, is very bad for the economy as well. And the DRC does not have a very good economy. So preventing people from doing their small businesses, earning a living, in addition to silencing them, is definitely not a good thing. And the region should be more vocal on that. Apart from the internet and the freedom of opinion, expression, and press freedom, we are seeing a very worrying development where armed forces are being deployed all over the place with the police, with guns. Some governors and local government representatives have made it clear that they will suppress any protests when the results are released. So it's a kind of, it's like a planned repression, and everybody is seeing that coming, and nobody is doing enough to prevent. So our call as Amnesty International, again, to the regional bodies is to act promptly to prevent people from dying again, because there has been enough death in this country.
All right, that message is clear. Now, Professor Peter Anyang Nyong'o, let's talk about the role of foreign countries outside Africa in ensuring the peaceful transition of power in the DRC and make sure that it is attainable. We well know, you've told us clearly what the African Union should do, what the EAC as well should do, and the regional bodies to actually make sure that facilitation of transfer of power is peaceful. But in a country which actually turned down foreign donors in terms of financing this year's general elections, where do foreign countries come in this particular standoff that is pitting in the DRC?
Well, you know, if you look at the UN Charter, there is something which is called a humanitarian crisis. And Jean has explained it very well, that the crisis in the DRC is both a political crisis and a humanitarian crisis. Now, remember when Rwanda had a crisis like that, and it led to the genocide, people really blame the UN for not having been proactive in intervening in Rwanda. A similar situation now occurs in the DRC, where the Security Council meets, and what the Security Council is trying to address is whether the statement that was released as who won is more important than anything else. And I know that the UN has a lot of information on what's going on in the DRC, and should have been preparing a much more solid intervention. First, a diplomatic intervention of sending a mission to the DRC to talk with Kabila and his government, and to tell Kabila this mobilization of troops in preparation for suppressing the people who will definitely revolt against your decision is not the best thing to do. And Kabila should be told that if you do that, you shall be ostracized from the rest of the world. I think the European Union kind of made a statement to that effect, but rather meekly. I think it should come out very clearly from the UN, from the European Union, from the AU, from SADC, from the East African community, very clearly that according to the African Union, you are only accepted to be a member if you are elected democratically. That's very clear. And the African Union cannot accept a government established by a military coup or a government established by the military oppressing and suppressing a democratic election. I think that should be very clear. And I think the silence may mean, on the one hand, that we are complicit in what's going on in the DRC, or on the other hand, that we don't care. But I think African people care about the DRC. If our governments don't know that we care, they should wake up.
All right, many thanks, Professor Peter Anyang' Nyong'o, Governor Kisumu County, as well as Jean Mobatsenga of Amnesty International, who's a researcher for the Democratic Republic of Congo. We'll definitely continue monitoring the developments happening in the DRC. Officially from the commission known as SENI, they had received only 47% of the vote tally sheets as of Saturday, with the Catholic Church, just as we mentioned, which is an influential voice in the sub-Saharan African nation, reporting data from its 40,000 election observers in polling stations, was very clear that it showed that there was a clear winner, and urging the Electoral Commission to announce accurate results. We'll keep you updated about the state of affairs.